Hi, everybody. I'm here with Michael Sanger, Emeritus Professor of Social Work from Valdosta State University. His areas of interest are spirituality and social work, loss and mourning, and complexity theory and social work. Dr. Sanger has written several articles, including 10 Years After, What is the Opposite of Terrorism? When Clients Sense the Presence of Loved Ones Who Have Died, A Simple Approach to Complexity Theory, Creating In-Depth Learning Experiences by Using Rawls' Veil of Ignorance, The Quadrant Framework for Addressing Spiritual and Religious Issues in Social Work, Only Don't Know, The Spirituality of Social Work. So Dr. Sanger also, I know just personally as a friend, is an avid meditator and has been meditating for decades. And so I thought he would be the perfect person to talk about giving and taking practice. Welcome, Dr. Sanger, and really thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
So my first question for you is, what is giving and taking practice, and what is it usually used for?
Well, for me, giving and taking practice, giving refers to thoughts and actions where we're sending our well-being to other people. It's the giving part is where we're giving what we have to others. The taking part refers to actions and thoughts we have where we're taking on the suffering and unhappiness of other people. So it's very unusual to what we usually think. So we're giving them all our goodness and taking all the suffering, which is really goodness.
It's a courageous activity. It's kind of the opposite of our usual self-preoccupation mindset. So when were you first introduced to the practice of giving and taking?
I'm not really sure about that, but I looked it up in a book that I've had been keeping. And 1993 is when I started doing it. And I was introduced, the first time I really thought about doing it was I was married to a woman who was dying. And that was one of the times it really became real to me, the idea of giving and taking. The person's name is Anne, by the way. But that's when I first really started paying attention to it. And
Well,
just because
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I learned this in terms of a Tibetan term, Tonglen. So I think of it as Tonglen, so I might say Tonglen occasionally, but that's just referring to the practice that Mr. Hurley is talking about and offering to you guys, to you people.
Good. And Tong, by the way, in Tibetan means to give, and Len means to take. And so a direct translation of the term. So what were your first reactions to hearing about this practice? And what made you decide to go forward and keep practicing it?
You say that again so I can think about it a little more.
Just what were your first reactions when you got introduced to it? And what made you decide to keep practicing it?
As I think I might have mentioned, what I really, the best I can remember about this is that my wife was dying at the time. And she had some diseases, we didn't know exactly what's going on. And being willing to, this is hard for me to think about actually. Sorry.
It's all right. You mind if I share a little?
Well, no, okay, so I just looked up another thing. was really good to think that there was a practice that I could do that would be helpful. I mean, here I am with the love of my life at the time is suffering and dying. And what do I do? And how do I deal with it myself? And what do I do with her? And this practice actually tells me what to do. It gives me advice as to this is how you can deal for her. Here's what you can do for yourself. And so that's a taking giving part.
I had the same reaction when my mom was dying because you feel so helpless. You can't really do anything for the person you love. And this does give you a sense that you're connecting with them and you're connecting with their suffering and you're giving them the best that you can, right? So so over the years, what are some of the times you've been drawn to use giving and taking or tonglen practice? So that's one major time when your wife is
Yes.
gone.
Um, well, another time when I'm doing it, using it right now is I have a woman who I love, another one who is suffering from SIBO, SIBO, which is very bad in terms of eating and digestion and stuff. And she struggles a lot with it. And so for me, a lot of what I do, and I hadn't thought about it in terms of this being giving and taking, it's just something I was doing, was I'm doing everything I can. I give her everything I can to make her life better
Hmm.
and just support her in what she's trying to do. And when she's upset and hurting, I can't do any magic to take away her pain, but I can, in my own mind, be willing to take it. So it's sort of like, it's like, I'm not a Christian, so I can't say, oh, Jesus, let me have this suffering. But it's sort of like, if there's anything I can do to take it, I'll take it. And so it's that's sort of the main. And who I already mentioned, and Joanne. Um, I don't know if this is relevant or not, and I hope you can cut it out if you need to. Um, so about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I found out I had Alzheimer's disease myself, which is it's going to kill me. There's no cure for it, and as time goes along, you lose your mind and your ability to view things, and it's something I would not wish on anybody in particular. And just thinking about this, when I was talking with Wilson, is the practice of giving and taking is kind of like, what do I want to do between now and when I don't know who I am anymore? And if I can make that practice of giving and taking a central part of my life, I will be happy. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's sort of like if I'm going to be fading away, I'd like to be fading away, taking the troubles and giving the good. And I actually think that works.
It and the tradition from whence it comes says that that's the best way for us to die because it makes us it keeps us in a place of compassion and that calls up the best of us and that's what we take forward, whatever you believe about death. um, Meanwhile, it also seems to mitigate some of the fear, and a lot of the fear is kind of self-focused, and so it kind of pulls us out of that. um, i really I really appreciate you sharing that. I know that it's really difficult. I feel it with you, as my friend. So what are some of the other benefits that you found by doing giving and taking practice?
Well, like to get away from somebody who's dying and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
I found I wasn't aware of doing this until I started thinking about what Wilson was asking me to think about this. I am so much better person when I think about this in the terms of giving and taking. So if somebody comes in and is just giving me a hard time, normally it's like, well, go, I can't say the word, but, oh, go have a good time. But instead, what I can do, and because of this practice, I actually, I hardly even think about it. It's like that person's suffering, and that's why they're being so difficult. And so it makes it easier. I don't know if I'm answering the question, but
Yeah.
but it's sort of like it's more automatic almost to do it because I've been doing it enough. I mean, way back for 20 years at least since Anne, the first person I was talking about. And I've just done it. And I hadn't thought about doing it as something that's going to be an essential part of my life. But what I realize is it's how I'm dealing with my woman who I love. Something, or again, my notes. I have an older sister, very, very smart, professor at some Ivy League school. And every week we get together, my two sisters, my girlfriend Joanne, and me, and we talk. My sister Carol is a total pain in the way she talks. She talks on and on and on, all about herself, and it's really frustrating because I want to talk about some of my problems. I think this practice lets me deal with her better.
Mhm.
It's that kind of thing. And I mean, for other people who are listening to this, it's like it actually helps you with your annoying brother-in-law or your boss who's just, you want to shoot them, but instead, I haven't thought about this. And you can shoot them with care. That sounds really bad, actually. make sure you get them right now. But you can actually, it's such an interesting thing. And I wasn't aware of this, honestly, until when Wilson asked me to do this. And I started to, have this conversation. And I thought about it a lot. And I realized how much of what I do comes from this practice. Um, and I'm a, I'm a Buddhist, so there's certain things that I practice from there. But this is much more central to who I want to be, how I want to be. So I would just, and it's probably a little difficult when you start doing it because you're not used to, I have to be nice to my older sister who's a jerk. But it's like when you start learning to do that, I think it makes it easier and better for everybody around. And it's a learnable, I don't know if learnable is the right word. If you get a chance to do this practice, you can practice. Oh, and I got to just say this because I have another friend, um, Jessica, I think Wilson knew her. She was in a very bad car accident 20 years ago. And and she's okay now, but not great, but very, very smart woman, very picks on you sort of in a nice way. And she said, well, I've got to go do my practice. And she says, why do you always do your practice? Why don't you just do it? And I think this practice of Tonglen or giving and taking, what I hope people can do is that it becomes something we just do, as opposed to a practice that we do. It just becomes part of our life. And for me, it's been wonderful. I mean, I would much rather there be no pain, no suffering for anybody. But if there's going to be some, I'm I'm glad that I can do something about it, and that then everybody can do something.
I use it all the time too. Like when I see clients and they tell me situations I cannot possibly repair, that are just hopeless and causing hopelessness and fear. it's something I come back to so I can stay with them through their pain. And I think it keeps us open and engaged. And instead of a lot of us tend to wall away from pain. We're so afraid of it that we try to close down. And if somebody brings a suffering story to us, we don't want to hear it, which is called the silencing response. We kind of close them down. And I think this does the opposite. It keeps us with people through their pain, which is what they really need. We all need. And so I'm with you. It becomes automatic over time. Um, would you be
How,
willing? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
how do you, how do you, could you give an example of how you do that?
Um,
Can you tell a story or is that ugly?
yeah. Basically, I just do the imagining that you're talking about of all the suffering and confusion that the client is bringing to me. I imagine inhaling it, and I imagine giving it to my self-centered fear and reducing my self-preoccupation. And then I try to tap into my kindness and my love, and I try to imagine that going out as light to comfort them and give them what they need to get through it. So that's how I do it. Would you be willing to walk everybody through how you practice it and like a short meditation?
Oh, I wouldn't want to ask me about that. Um, I tell me a little bit more about that because I used to teach
Yeah.
and it's,
Well, I was just thinking for people who are watching this and they want to try it out, just to do like a short guided meditation. Um, you could pick, like, for instance, in the world, there's so many tragedies going on as we speak, from what's happening in Ukraine to what's happening in Maui. They just had those terrible fires. Um, so there's a lot that we could focus on. Um, but would you be willing just to,
yeah. Well, I think there's two things. So, oh man, when you see people suffering, no, when you see people who really annoy you, people who are jerks,
Mhm.
people who cut you off on the highway when you're driving someplace. And what I really dislike, I stopped driving. I stopped driving myself, by the way, because I'm not a safe driver anymore. Um, but I'll be in a car with somebody, and somebody behind us is honking their horn for no reason at all. And the first thing I want to do is go to the. I have never done this. Go, what the heck the matter with you? Whatever. Not doing that is a really good practice for me. I mean, for me, forget them, but it's like learning to hold back my anger, my frustration, whatever it is, um, and just not shooting it on to the other person and actually being willing to take it,
Yeah.
which I'm not intending to do at all. I'm not thinking, oh, here comes a terrible person. I'll take all of it. I don't think of it that way, but it becomes a habit. And I think one of the good things about doing this ongoing thing, I mentioned this, I started doing this about 20 or 30 years ago. And it's just over time, it just has become second thought kind of thing,
Second nature?
second nature. That's how we say it in America, huh? second nature. Um, so I think when you see somebody doing something really good, I don't know if this fits in with Wilson, but tell me, because I think to me it does. Um, I live very close. I'm a 10-minute walk to a grocery store, big place, grocery store, and ice cream store, all kinds of stuff. And I'm not working anymore. I do a little bit of writing. One of the things that makes me the happiest in my life, and this is going to sound weird, is seeing somebody, best story would be seeing some old man wanting to open a door so he can go to a liquor store, and he can't open the door because he's got to hold his cane. So I hold the door for him. I'm taking on his suffering. I'm making his life better by just holding the door open for him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not strangely, but they always say, "Thank you, sir." And I think it's weird. They call me, I get sir a lot, which is kind of like, I'm not a sir. I have a hat on that I'm not going to put on, be my sir hat. But it's just trying to do this when you can in little ways. It becomes sort of a habit, sounds sort of bad, but it becomes second, it becomes just something you do. And because in my experience, I think what Wilson has said in his experience, even though it's a difficult thing and you're dealing with people suffering, it's a good suffering. I've never said that in my life. And when I said it, I'm Buddhist. I'm officially a Jewish because my mother was Jewish and my father was Jewish. But I'm not a Christian. But I think that's almost a Christian thing,
Mm-hmm.
to take on other people's suffering. And we all know somebody who's willing to do that.
Well, it's actually, if you look at the historical account of the founder of Christianity, that's what he did. He took on the suffering of the world. Um, so I'm going to, I think that's a good place to stop because really what you're talking about is turning the giving and taking into action, where it's not just a passive mental exercise, but it's informing your decisions when you encounter people in the world who are going through hardship and that sense of it feels good to help people, you know?
And it fits, and it feels good not to attack somebody.
Yes.
If
Yeah.
somebody's being a jerk, um, my dad was in the army. I played football. I don't got time with it, but it's like it's just remembering remembering to do this, give and take, and rather than giving hatred, you're giving love and compassion, and rather than taking as you taking on their suffering is very brave.
It creates a kind of courageous compassion. It's
Yeah.
what the world needs. You know, you see conflicts all over the place and the murder rate. And, you know, there's so much unnecessary human created suffering that a simple practice like this could turn it around, you know, if people learn how to do it. So, Michael, thank you. I'm
I'll say
very,
something after
yeah.
you sign off. I want to say a little.
Oh, yeah. I'm gonna just pause it so we can talk, but I'll stop the recording. But really, thank you for sharing those experiences and your years of practice.
And thank you for helping me think about all this again, which has been really big benefit. Just thinking about it and looking and reading the stuff. So I would suggest everybody who's listening try it a little bit. And I'm out.